So for the internet divide, talking about the devices, the access, and the knowledge, I thought this was really interesting, especially as I'm doing the reading because last week, or was it 2 weeks ago when we did the interview, I kind of found out that the school that I am talking about did not even have internet access for a lot of the students. I believe it was 31 students. And I just found that absolutely insane just based on the fact that my school, so I'm at an inner city school, I'm actually at a Muncie school, we provide all kinds of access to students. We provide all the devices. We provide internet if they need the internet through a hotspot. We just hook up the device, and so it's password protected, and you just can't add all these other devices that aren't on the school. But it's all interconnected and done like that. And I just kind of assumed that all the other schools did that too, which is very naive of me. And I know that, which is kind of funny. But so what drew my attention the most as I'm doing the reading is the access, the internet quality in general, and especially reading the first, so the pre-pandemic, from John Lay and Nicole Widmar. It says that access to the internet in many rural areas is non-existent or severely limited, which has been problematic for years, but arguably never as acutely painful as during the COVID-19 pandemic, when getting online became, for many people, compulsory. Rural areas without sufficient internet connectivity and services face challenges including brain drain of talent, skills, training development, and jobs, telework, lack of access to telemedia, limitations of distance learning, and the lack of ability to employ precision agriculture technology and use data in farm rural industries. So overall, there's already this big lack of divide, but then when you add the pandemic and then students can't even get access to the work, that is a whole new level of not being able to do your work. And it's simply, as that quote said, I really like that they said they face challenges, including the training development and lack of access. And so that really goes into the students. They can't even access their work. They can't even do the work, even if they want to do the work and they really care to do the work. They can't even access it. And that was the truth for, I think, at that time in the interview. Right now, I think it stands at 31 based on the data, but in COVID and the data, there were about 20 kids at that time who did not have internet access. And so they were making copies, running those out to students, putting them on the porch, making sure they picked them up at a distance. The students would have so many days to complete, put it back on the porch at an assigned time. They would go pick it up, bring it back to the school, make all these copies and put it on a hard drive, take the hard drive to the teacher. Teacher would grade. It was kind of roundabout like that. And so that's what was happening, and I just find that really interesting. And so the second reading during, it was Anna Paula Courier. She says that teachers should create online learning spaces of caring and support. Such spaces are accessible and flexible and provide learners with options for participation that take into account the struggles and constraints that they may be facing. And later on in this article, it also talks about different ways that teachers can provide the online materials to students who don't have internet access. And it actually kind of stated what was happening with the school about like printing it off, having someone drop it off, that whole process that I just described. And I find that really interesting, but also she also says such spaces are accessible and flexible and provide learners with options for participation that take into account the struggles. And I don't know if we're really, truly doing that with that, if we're really taking into account what these kids are doing, how hard that is. If they have a question and they don't have internet access and the book only provides so much information, they're kind of stuck. And that kind of really irritates me a little bit. And I know that it's not their fault, but it just really is irritating to know kids cannot go and explore. They cannot do research. They cannot be led to think about other things. And then if they get used to that cycle of well, I don't know, and this only provides this much information, they're going to get stuck in a cycle of doing that. So when they do have access later on, they have no practice. They have no want to actually even look. And so that kind of bothered me a little bit. And then so the divide and equity issues and context, kind of just talked about that. And then the Chandra et al. I hope there we go. So this is this is in the third reading. I found this really interesting, and I kind of leaving here for a second for everyone to read. And so it's the percent of students without adequate connectivity, and 1 in 4 students lack adequate internet, and small divides. And then for states with the large divides, almost half of those students lack the internet. And then furthermore, up to 400,000 teachers can't teach because of the lack of internet. And I found that really interesting because, again, as I stated at the very beginning of this, I didn't realize this was such an issue. I just kind of thought that the this doesn't really affect us. This affects different communities because I live in the school community that I'm talking about. I drive to my community where I teach, and so I just truly had no idea that this was an issue and that this was coming back, and that really bothers me. And I wish they would have access to even just the hotspots and the mobile hotspots and stuff like that. But knowing that we're a rural community, will they even connect in the country? I don't know, and that bothers me a lot. So to talk about the ISTE standards in context of the considering my views on digital learnership and citizenship, I really like 2.6, the facilitator for the teacher leader. So for me, for how I use it in the classroom, especially 2.6a, where it says foster a culture where students take ownership of their learning goals and outcomes in both independent and group settings. And so I need to not only just give the students the stuff and just expect them to do it, it even says, and it starts with foster the culture. So really including students, inviting them in, having different modes of accessibility and how they express. And I really like that. It kind of comes into UDL, which I talked about last week a lot. Just really fostering the culture where students have the ownership of their work and going in and moving that. And so also 2.6c, create learning opportunities that challenge students to use the design process and computational thinking to innovate and solve problems. I love PBL, problem-based learning, especially because I teach high ability, so I really push that a lot more than I see my colleagues do who don't teach high ability, and I get that, but I really love that, and so I do that a lot. For a tech leader, I love, let's see, so 2.2 even says leader, but I think these really kind of go into how we do this into the technology policy. And so 2.2a says shape and advance accelerated share a vision for empowering learning with technology by engaging with educational stakeholders. That should be addressed, and that was actually in my rubric, is addressing the stakeholders. What role do they have? How are they playing into this plan? What is at stake for each of these people? They're called stakeholders for a reason, so what is at stake for each of them? And I really like that. And then I like 2.2b, advocate for equitable access to educational technology. So what I just talked about of not even having access. Digital content and learning opportunities to meet the diverse needs of all students. Not most students, all students. And I really think that needs to be talked about. That's kind of where my grant is going, is about getting access for all students. And then as a curriculum leader, I love the 2.7, the analyst, especially 2.7a, provide alternative ways for students to demonstrate competency and reflect on their learning using technology. So UDL is not just, well, I don't know how to work the stuff, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's not what that is. It's what needs do you have, how can I assist you, how can I best support your learning with technology. And so I really like that. So where does it belong in the curriculum of our school? It belongs everywhere. It should be everywhere. And I think it was one of the first weeks we talked about internet access and how that works, and like, what if the school, and my specific thread of people we were talking about how when the internet goes out, what do you do? And that is a problem, and that's not one that I am fully equipped to answer. However, if you always have a backup plan, or just like, I always had a one sheet of everything printed out just in case, because one time we lost access for like 3 days, couldn't print anything. It was horrendous. So now after that, I keep an access. So if I have to do anything, I can go and make a copy at least. But however, when you're just thinking in a perfect world, reflect in using that technology. I love it. And then also use assessment data to guide progress and communicate with students, parents, and educational stakeholders to build student self-direction. So using that data and not just be like, okay, well, they did this, I'm teaching this well, or I'm not teaching this well, but we'll get to it, or anything like that. No, use that data, learn from it, how can we grow from there? It should always be, how can we grow from there? Not, I'm doing well, I'm okay, I'm not going to worry about it. Because an example, I'm not saying this to brag either, but like, I had a student coming to me in a 6th grade level, and I could have just been like, well, he's already above 5th grade, I'm not going to worry about it. No, at the end of the year, he was pushing 9th grade level, which like makes me really happy, but he also put in the work, so that's with him as well. But however, you have to use the data and what you know, and then where can you get them? Where can you grow them no matter where they're at? Below, on, above grade level, using that data and the technology that it provides. And then finally, talking about fake news and kind of looking at the ISTE standards as well. I really kind of like both the 2.3 Citizen Part B, establishing learning culture that promotes curiosity and critical examination of online resources and fosters digital literacy and media fluency. So critical examination is the key word there. And then as well, 2.4, the collaborator D, demonstrate cultural competency when communicating with students, parents, and colleagues, and interact with them as co-collaboration in student learning. So first, talking about the critical examination. First, how can policy address that issue? Knowing how teachers are trained, giving teachers professional development to do so, especially in these ISTE standards and developments that will kind of cater to that. We need to establish learning cultures that will promote curiosity, research, wanting to know more, but also wanting to know where to get information and how to really kind of critically look at that information. Exactly how the collaborator says, demonstrate cultural competency when communicating with all these people, the stakeholders, and interact with them as co-collaborators and student learning. If we're all learning the same ideas on how to critically look at things, then we're going to understand this is fake, this is not real, and this is why I know that, because I know I have these research values. I have this skill because I've been practicing it, and my parents practice it, my community practices it, I practice it in school. They're going to understand that. And so if policy really kind of allows us to get development to do that, that would be great. The experiences I have are interesting because I have 5th grade, so a lot of their thoughts and stuff come from the parents, which is like totally fine at that age because that's kind of how they learn, and then obviously growing with peers and stuff. But their first experience is usually with their parents, and especially in this last election, which I wasn't even teaching these kids, but however, things have rolled on and on and on and on. And someone was talking about the election being rigged, and no matter what side people think on, etc., as a teacher, I really try not to get into like sensitive subjects with my kids, politics, especially in 5th grade. Like, there are just certain things in a community school, a public community school, you can't really do, and that's just one I choose not to engage in. However, we did stop, and I was like, where did you find that information? How do you know that? Oh, it was on Facebook. My parents told me. Is Facebook a credible source? How do we know that? What do we know? Who put it on Facebook? So we kind of like had a spiral moment. I didn't really tell them either way of my personal thinking because it doesn't matter. However, I did teach them how to critically look at information, which I'm sure they knew if we're critically looking at information what Mrs. Parkinson thinks. However, that was up to interpretation, so I didn't get in trouble. However, obviously, if you know how to critically look at information, you're going to know the truth in that and what really happens and how elections work. However, anyways, and so how have I addressed and envisioned to address student information literacy, their coursework? I'm actually going to start implementing this soon because of that situation, and then like there were several ones because 5th grade, I love them, but they're always learning and doing something wild. But this class has really showed me that I need to teach students like first day, that first week when you're trying to figure out things to do, and like you don't want them to dive day one into curriculum. In elementary, at least, in our elementary, we're guided not to do that. But this is a really great time. I can teach them how to research, teach them how to critically look at information. What do we know is real? How do we know this is real? How do we know this might be maybe someone's opinion? And how do we know sometimes opinions are good for supporting certain things? We can back it up with facts. And like, how can we do that? And even at 5th grade, they need to learn. That's where they start. The younger you start doing this, the better. And I think if you add that into a policy, the digital leadership that I had said, and the digital collaborator, and the citizen, then students are going to learn that because it's in the policy that for teachers to do because they have been trained through personal development to do all of this.